We're back out here once again, and today we're talking about why the fall may just be my favorite time of year to go bass fishing. You can catch good numbers of fish, but you can also catch some really nice quality size fish as well. We'll talk about some tips and tricks that I use to make your fall bass fishing that much easier. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one. There we go, that's one. That's a fish. Ooh, that's not bad. Come on. And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing. And for myself and a lot of other anglers, fishing during the fall is the absolute best time of year. Now, you've got some guys who really like fishing during the pre-spawn and the spawn. And that's fine. You can catch some great fish during then. But the reason why I like the fall much better is because during that late winter and early spring, you've only got a small window. You've only got a couple of weeks, maybe a month at the most, to get in all the fishing that you can to try to catch the biggest and best bass that you can. But during the fall, you've got a couple of months or more, depending on your fishery, where you can catch not only good numbers of bass, but also some nice quality sized ones. During the fall is when I'm catching those 5, 6, and 7 pound bass as those bigger girls are coming up from out deep, up shallow, and they're feeding up for the winter. So that's when I do most of my damage when it comes to those better quality fish. Now, am I going to catch my PB? Well, you never know. It might happen, but I can still consistently catch bigger bass, which for me is a lot more fun. But the reason I'm making this video is because I talked to a gentleman the other day, and he was sharing with me his frustration. He couldn't catch any bass. And I told him, I said, well, rule number one when it comes to bass fishing is always locate the bass. And you've got to understand that during the fall, 90% of that water is empty. See, during the summertime, those bass are not in big groups. You've got some of the younger buck males that swim around in wolf packs of 3 to 5. But for the most part, a lot of those bass are roaming around by themselves. So they're kind of scattered out a little bit more across the lake, a little bit more evenly. But during the fall, those bass compact back up and they follow those migration routes back to where they're going to spend the winter. And along the way, they're hitting those waypoints like we talked about. And if you don't try to find them, if you're not doing your homework with Navionics and Active Captain and Google Earth, if you're not doing your homework trying to find where those migration routes are, you can really have a tough time of it. Well, he was saying that, well, his favorite spot has always been his favorite spot, and he didn't need to change his favorite spot. It's always been his favorite spot for as long as he's been fishing. But he's not been catching any bass there. He's not caught any bass there in weeks, and he was getting mad. And of course, he wanted me to give him the magic bait. And I told him, I said, I can't give you a magic bait. And I was trying to let him know, I'm not holding a secret from you. You need to fish where those bass are. But he was so locked in on that one spot, his favorite spot. And I've talked to bank anglers who have that same mentality. This is the spot that I always fish. This is the spot where I can only fish. Well, unfortunately, if that's not part of those bass migration route, you're going to be fishing empty water. There is nothing I can do. There's no bait that I can give you that will make those bass appear magically out of nowhere for you to catch them. That bait does not exist. If I can find that bait, I'll let you know, but I've never run across such a bait. So I have to go where the bass are. And again, the key to that is finding those migration routes. And once you find those migration routes, it's a lot easier. You can worry about the baits to throw after that. And the first thing that I'm doing whenever I'm settling on what baits to throw is I look at one simple thing. The easiest thing I can tell you is to look at the wind. If you've got a lot of wind, if you've got a lot of current, Doesn't matter if it's a bluebird sky, it doesn't matter if it's cloudy, doesn't matter if it's going to rain. I look at and see what the wind is, which direction it's going to blow, and then I choose my presentations from there. And it makes things so much easier. When I say I'm using the wind as a determining factor, as a guideline for my bait selection, what do I mean? Well, let's say I get out to the lake and I'm seeing very little wind. The water's calm. There's not really any current. It does not matter if we have clouds or if it's bluebird sky. But I already know that I can probably get away with using some type of finesse presentation. I can use a wacky rig, a Waco rig. I can use a Ned rig. Something that moves slow in the water. Something I can use in those targeted areas. I believe those bass are holding up. Now, that doesn't mean that I can't use a crankbait or a chatterbait or some other type of moving bait, but from my experience, I think that I would do much better with a finesse style presentation. Especially in my fisheries, those bass really seem to like a slower, more finesse style presentation whenever that current is down, whenever there is less wind. Now, if we've got some wind, we start to get some wave action, we start to get some wind-driven current. And again, it doesn't matter if there's cloud cover or not. But what that means is, well, a lot of times fishing a finesse presentation goes right out the window. Anybody who's fished with braid, especially light braid, can tell you it's very thin, very wispy, and it doesn't do so well in the wind. It just kind of floats all over the place. And that makes your finesse presentation almost impossible to work. You've got a big bow in your line, so you're not working the area that you want to work. Being accurate with your casts becomes much more difficult. So that's why I try to steer away from those types of presentations. Now, granted, we can always put a weight on there, right? We can always go with a weighted wacky rig or a Texas rig with a bullet weight and drag it along the bottom, something like a Ned rig or a shaky head, if we can get a big enough bait. But at a certain point, we've got to say to ourselves, well, am I really doing that much more good? Or am I losing the effect that I wanted to get with this finesse style presentation? Now, there's nothing wrong with a weighted Texas rig. It's one of my favorite ways to do it. But under certain circumstances, especially when I'm looking to fish a certain location in a certain way, a weighted Texas rig, something with too much weight, just sort of defeats the purpose. So that's when I move to a more active type of presentation, a moving type of presentation. You know, and you guys have seen me use this. This is what I call the beetle swim. It's just a swim bait. This is a 1/4 ounce swim bait jig, and I've got a small 3-inch. This is a Crush City from Rapala or Rapala. This is the Mayor, and just a little beetle spin blade on it. I put these on there, adds a little extra flash. I've got that wind, I've got that chop breaking up the surface, and this works exceptionally well whenever I'm working those areas. I can still work them thoroughly, I can still work them slowly, or I can speed things up and maybe cover a little bit more water, you know, and it works great from the bank. And another thing is, well, for you bank anglers, something like this, and this is just a jig, right? A bitsy bug or a bitsy flip, take the skirt off of it and put that same swim bait on there. I also like a Scottsboro or a regular Kitech, or even, you know, a Rage Swimmer. I've had a lot of success using those types of presentations, especially from the bank. When those bass are coming up near the bank during the fall transition, whenever they're following those routes and you find that those bass are coming up near the bank, I've caught quite a few really nice fish doing it that way, especially from the bank. It's one of my favorite presentations to work as the weather gets colder and as we get deeper into the winter. But one of the main presentations, one of the things you've got to have tied on right now, like I've said many times, is a jerkbait. This jerkbait right here, and this is just that Yo-Zuri jerkbait. You see me work it all the time. I was out the other day and we had some good wind. It was coming out of the north and it was blowing very steadily. I found an area that traditionally I knew those bass were going to be holding up in during that migration, where there was a couple of spots where they like to stop, get a breather, get a rest, whatever, before moving on. I worked this in that area and it wasn't long before this happened. Why don't you put that Guggen one on? There we go, that's one. That's a fish. Ooh, that's not bad. Come on. How well do I have him? Oh, I got him pretty good. There we go. Ooh, nice fat little bass. Nice fat little bass on the jerkbait. Beautiful. Yeah, he's right at a pound. Probably about 13 inches. So, good little fish. Beautiful little fish. We sure do appreciate you. Thank you very much. Alright, that's one. Let's go get another one. So, not a huge fish, but it was a nice fish. Had a fat little tummy on it, and it was a lot of fun to catch. And before long, I had turned that bite on. I was able to pull 2 or 3 of those same type of fish out of that area. I moved on and waited a few hours and came back, and in that same area I was able to catch a few more fish. That's one of the great things about fishing in the fall. So think about that. The first thing you want to do is locate where those bass are, and then you want to let the conditions decide whether you want to go slow or whether you want to go fast. And whenever you do that type of mentality, whenever you have that methodology when you're out on the water, you're going to find that catching those bass, locating those bass, doing those things just becomes so much easier. And I'm telling you, fall's going to be your favorite time to go fishing too. So there you have it, a couple of real easy tips to help you put more bass in the boat during the fall. Just remember, when those bass are grouping up, it's going to create much more dead water in the fishery. So pay attention to where those bass are moving, how they're moving. And also, make sure you use the wind as your guide. Let it be the biggest dictator in how you select your baits. Once you put those two things together, you're going to find that bass fishing in the fall can be amazing. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.